Alright guys, we're now moving into chapter 6 of Marx's Capital, which is entitled Sale and Purchase of Labor Power. And last time we discussed that surplus value is not created in this circuit of money to commodity to more money, but is created by something else. And it's going to be created by a special commodity. So Marx is going to say that it's created by labor power. And so this chapter is going to be a discussion on how labor power creates value, what is the value of labor power itself, and so on. And so first and foremost, we should just ask the question, well, what is labor power? Well, it's going to be the aggregate of mental and physical capacities that are exercised to produce use values. So that is the muscles in the body, the circuits in the brain, and the firing of electrons, and all of the physical processes that are involved in a human being that allow them to create use values and be productive. And so we're going to see that there's this distinction between labor, which is an activity, and labor power. And the distinction is going to be there because labor power is going to be that thing which is sold as a commodity that adds the value in the capital circuit of MCM. And so moreover, the person who owns this capacity of this labor power, he confronts the market, or she confronts the market, selling it as a commodity. And so this is going to be something that is unique to capitalist society, according to Marx. If you look at something like feudalist society or agricultural society, where 80% of people work the land, you'll see that there actually isn't really a labor market. There isn't this division in society between those who own the means of production and capital, and the means, therefore, to subsistence, and those who don't and who must sell their labor power in order to survive. That distinction doesn't really exist. In that society, specifically feudal society, the vast majority of employment was within the family. It would be that you were employed by your family to work land that you are a shareholder in the collective ownership of. And so it's only when capitalism begins that we have this selling of labor power on the marketplace like a commodity. And so Marx is going to say that this comes out of the extinction of previous social forms, and it's in no way natural but is socially constructed. And so there's certain conditions then which labor power must have in order to be sold as a commodity and in order to be bought and sold. And the first one is that it has to be sold for a duration of time. It cannot be sold wholesale lest that person selling their labor power becomes a slave. And then secondly, the seller cannot own capital. They must be selling it because they need to sell it in order to subsist, because they need to make money to live. They need a wage. And so these factors will be the presupposition of capitalism, or one of them. We talked before about how the unit of capitalist wealth is the commodity, and that capitalism is concerned with the production of commodities, but commodities are produced in previous societies too, and the general formula of commodity circulation exists in other societies as well. But this distinction between the buyer and seller of labor power, that is something that is unique to capitalism, according to Marx. And that's going to be one of the presuppositions of the advancement of capitalism. And so the labor power that somebody has can never actually be sold, right? Because ultimately it's still your body. You can just walk out of the workplace at any time and go starve on the streets. You can do that because ultimately you still own your labor power, but it is alienated. It is given to somebody else, and the use values of it is reaped by somebody other than yourself. Now there's the question of, well, if labor power is a commodity, then it must have a value, right? It must have an exchange value. And so what is the value of labor power? Well, like any commodities, it's going to be the aggregate of labor required to produce it. But what do we mean when we say the aggregate labor required to produce labor power? Well, it's going to be the amount of abstract labor required to maintain and reproduce the labor power in the workplace. So that's going to be the abstract labor in the commodities required for the subsistence of the worker, so the money required for them to go buy their food and to survive. But it's also going to be to reproduce the substitutes of that worker after they die, or in other words, for them to be able to look after their families as well, their reproduction. And in the case of skilled labor, it's going to be the commodities required for their skills and training. And so all of that that aggregate abstract labor required to reproduce those things, that is going to determine the value of any given labor power. And another unique aspect about this that we'll close off with is that the use value of labor power is used before it is paid for. So in other words, you get given a job and you must work that job before you receive your wage. And so there isn't this duration where two commodities exchange at the same time. At first, the use value of the labor is reaped by the capitalist, and then the wage is given to the worker later. And so there's this delay by which the worker receives what he is due. And so that's going to be chapter 6.